please extend a warm NCS welcome to our guest this morning, Nate Fischer.
Thank you, Charles. That was a excellent intro, and I am very glad to be here. It is wonderful to be here. I gave my last NCS talk to the Manhattan chapter yesterday, the New York chapter yesterday, and while looking up, I was typing out the notes. I'd started typing out notes for my talk, and I went in my Evernote and I searched for NCS talk, and up came a note, NCS talk, and I realized, and it was from 2017, and I realized I had actually addressed the NCS chapter that I regularly attended. Thank you. That I regularly attended in San Francisco in sometime in 27, and done what you do at an NCS talk, which is go through sort of my life up to that point and a lot of my personal story and a lot of my passions. And at that point, it was sort of, in many ways, very, very early days of, you could say, a journey that I'm continuing to talk about today. So it was actually pretty interesting to go back and look at what I had said then and what I was thinking about and what I was really passionate about and felt called to, and basically continue the next 6 years of that journey. And in many ways, the same themes that were nascent at that point. I mean, there's themes that have shaped my entire life, and I'll talk about those. And there were themes that were nascent then that have continued. So it was a fun. I attended for about a year when I lived there, and so I have been familiar with NCS for a while. And actually, despite after law school not going with the goal of building a career like Paul's, I did spend a summer at the same firm that Paul was at. I think probably about a year after you left it, and so I actually knew your name from my time there. And then I realized, and due to some things I'll mention, I had the opportunity to sort of make a turn that reflects sort of who I naturally am in a pretty good way. So as Charles alluded to a little bit in the intro, I'm focused on venture. That's what New Founding does. I also have the nonprofit American Reformer, and in many ways they're parallel ventures. It's not sort of one's to make money and the other is what I am sort of passionate about. They're both ultimately about a positive vision for society, and I think venture is a extraordinary vehicle to talk about a positive vision. In many ways, venture is talking about a future. Every company is really more of an idea and a vision that you want to build, especially the sort of companies that seek venture capital and that seek that kind of impact. And ultimately, if we're going to build a positive vision, there is a need to illuminate that with with a really deep and I think grounded understanding of Christian truth and what we should be aiming for. And so American Reformer in many ways was a desire to dig in the evangelical and in the Protestant side, which is an area where I think we have a rich tradition. We share a lot with the Catholics, but contemporary discourse don't tend to have the same level of exploration and publication exploring those questions as Catholics do. So even though First Things is not even officially a Catholic organization, de facto, it's always been dominated by Catholics, and many of those organizations are. And so that was part of the goal of American Reformer is can I help build out something that can re-engage the evangelical world with that tradition and with some of the questions that are important in a time like we're in, and that kind of gets to my talk. In addition, just to give you a little more background on what I'm doing, and then I'll touch on some more of this at the end. We have a venture fund. We invest in companies where there is a true alignment in the business itself with aspects of our mission. So not just values aligned individuals, but the business model itself aligns with some of this sort of Christian conservative distinctives for the future that we want to see. And then we also have recently gotten into real estate, back for me, and we're doing what you could call a charter town or a charter community, where we're actually buying a large share of a existing town in Appalachia, not too far from Nashville, as well as a number of rural counties, and helping orchestrate the move of a lot of people there. There's a lot of people who are looking for the opportunity to actually be part of building something where they can build a sort of thicker array of institutions than you can often do in a place where you remain either more scattered or more of a minority. And so that's generated tremendous excitement, a few national hit pieces, and a lot of leads from both the hit pieces and the positive ones. So that's a good segue into kind of the fundamental, the overview of what I'm doing, and sort of a tie-in to the title, where I say a natural dissident. I have what, and it's interesting given the mention of Bill and the sort of risk of jail and things. I mean, the title dissident ties to something that in certain parts of the world does result in meaningful risk. I'm focused on the business space. I think the business space is actually a space that is friendly to dissonant ideas, and ideally allows you to do so in a way that is positive in what we're building. But I would say I have what some might seem to some to be radical ideas. I think the world changes far more than many people assume, and that I think in coming decades we're likely to see particularly significant changes to everything from culture to the structure of our government. And to give an illustration, like, it wouldn't surprise me if within 50 years we're no longer operating under something that many would look at and say this resembles our current constitutional system strongly. But I also don't think that's as radical. It sounds radical to a lot of people, but I don't think that's as radical as it might seem, given base rates of change throughout history and around the world. If you look around the world, and the example I give is France is on its 5th republic, and it fully changed constitutions in 68, 69, and I think 20 years before it had changed previously. And there's a lot of change that happens. I think sometimes that's masked by the appearance of continuity, but you have what, if you look back on it, you realize are pretty radical changes in things like the dominant layer of government, the form of government, the sort of shape of how society is organized. And 50 years is it doesn't feel like that long of a time horizon, but it's a long time horizon, and these things change radically. And I think when an environment like that, if you're thinking about changes of that order, and you're willing to think longer term, there's sort of a range of ideas that are worth engaging and considering that are a lot broader than many people do. I think there's sort of a natural tendency to consider ideas within a narrower range. Given that levels of change, the question that I really think about a lot is, what are Christians doing about it? Fundamentally, if the range of possibilities of the future, what the future looks like if you look 50 years out, is as broad as that, and you look around the world and you see the fall of the Soviet Union, you see radical changes in a lot of the world, we should be open to that possibility. What are Christians doing about it? Are we ready for confronting and really helping lead, ideally, helping shape and influence potentially significant changes in the shape and structure of society, rather than taking as a given a lot of things that are in the present condition, many of which we might not even be happy about. And then I would say, finally, there's a lot of vibrant discussions about what the future, including a very different from the present, might look like, happening all over the place. Especially you see that in places like Bitcoin and crypto world. You see a lot of stuff in the AI world about this. Very active discussions, some of them I would say somewhat grim and dystopian in many cases, even by proponents of certain visions. Christians are notably absent from these spaces, and kind of it goes to sort of the heart of who I am in many ways, and what I'm drawn to, that I'm drawn to the sort of places that we're not, and they're significant and they matter. So for many years, my question is, how can I change that? That was what took me to San Francisco in the first place. Very early years in many ways was this just being at the beginning of it. These are some themes that I think matter greatly, and what can we do about that? And so going back to my background in my childhood, I've reflected on patterns of who I am and patterns of what I've felt drawn to that have shaped what I'm doing now. So to get to that, Since childhood, I've always enjoyed contrarian positions. That's been a natural inclination. I would say often, especially in childhood, hopefully less so now, although I will confess that Twitter encourages bad habits here. And the algorithm rewards as well, sadly. I've enjoyed contrarian positions and often just being provocative for the fun of it. I was homeschooled before it was cool, as you could say. I was homeschooled in New York. I'm 39. I was homeschooled in all 12 years growing up in New York, which was not a friendly state to homeschool in either. We actually had a picture on our fridge of the head of the Homeschool Legal Defense Association when I was young with a phone number to call if the cops show up to take us for truancy or something. So now it's this sort of major national movement. And I was growing up in a family where I was really encouraged in independent thought. So my mom, they were a Christian, conservative family, but in many ways she loved learning and she loved the idea of independent, of sort of teaching us to think, teaching us to learn. You can almost say a sort of crunchy con or conservative Christian hippie family in some ways. We were very rural, not really super engaged in or plugged into sort of politics or finance or that stuff, that kind of thing, and really very interested in the nature, very interested in the sort of journey of homeschooling, which was it was a great environment for someone who's naturally prone to think independently. It really encouraged a lot of that, and I would sort of take that and take it a step further at times. So just to give an example, other homeschoolers in our homeschool community were often more conservative. There's sort of the median homeschooler was more of a fundamentalist person who was there for conservative Christian reasons to avoid other ideas. Very, very good people. I liked to be obnoxious. So I remember my dad was studying Age of Earth and really into sort of old Earth creationism at one time. And I remember with a group of these fellow homeschoolers, and I'm 10 years old or something, 11 years old, I look at a rock there. I'm like, we're at a homeschool co-op, and I remember pointing, and I said, that rock looks very old. I bet that rock's 100 million years old. And all the other kids are like, how can you be a Christian if you say that's 100 million years old? You don't believe the Bible. And I enjoyed being uphill. And the parents would complain to my parents that I was corrupting the youth or whatever. And that was a lot of the story of my engagement. So what I realized over time, though, and I was a contrarian, I was sort of obnoxious about it, but I was also just I was happy being the guy who disagreed with everyone in the room. I enjoyed it. I thrived on it. What I realized over time is contrarianism, pure contrarianism, is really just as controlled by conventional opinion as being a conventional thinker. I mean, if all you're doing is you're sort of rejecting what the conventional position is, you're just a mirror and you're controlled by them. And realize that's not a good position. That's not a sustainable position. But that particular inclination can be very useful if you're focused on select ideas that are non-consensus but are important and true. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but that really is what I think a mature version of that looks like. You recognize where a contrary idea is true and really recognize that it can be very important and are comfortable taking a stand on that in a contrary way. And many other areas recognize that conventional wisdom is accurate. So going back a little more, just to give a little more background personally, and I'll come back more to that contrarianism a little bit later, but I grew up in a great family. My family took our faith very seriously, grew up in a Christian Reformed church, which is sort of a branch of the Dutch Reformed tradition in Wappingers Falls, New York, which is not that far from here. It's about an hour and a half upstate from New York City in the Hudson Valley. It was an environment that, as I said, naturally encouraged learning, naturally encouraged sort of the appreciation of the world, the appreciation of a lot of things. Very, very, very active in our church. My dad was an elder, and really a brother and a sister. I was the oldest of three. Dad worked at IBM for most of his career, and really, what was fortunate is, despite that contrarian inclination, I never felt significant doubt. It never extended to Christianity. I never really doubted Christianity, which is perhaps surprising for someone with that inclination. So maybe I already had the seeds of I'm not just going to be contrarian for the sake of contrarian. I'm gonna accept important truths where they're true. And so that was very fortunate. I sort of always believed in Christianity and grew and strengthened in the faith over time. But never had a period where I was rejecting it. Going back to the contrarian bent, it shaped my career choice early on in college. Going to what Charles mentioned a little bit, so I was originally interested in politics. I've been interested in ideas that have significant impact. But I remember spending a summer in D.C. after my sophomore year, and I became convinced, and it was sort of pretty obvious at the time, 2005, D.C. was going to be a place that did not reward contrarian thinking. D.C. was a place where you play a certain game and you follow certain rules and you will rise. Your career will go well. And you don't follow those rules and you can be shunted to the side. And in my mind, I was so naturally ingrained with this idea that I like being able to dissent that I think within a week I just totally switched my career. It was no longer I'm going to go into politics. It was now I'm going to go into investing. Investing, you make a non-consensus but correct bet, you make a lot of money. Politics, you're done. You're outside. And so I just switched that as a goal, and it was sort of obvious to me that that's the path I had to take. Law school made sense as an avenue to get there, given where I was coming from. Plan was to go into bankruptcy law and then into distressed investing, which is obviously a well-suited place for making contrary bets. And as Charles said, I met my wife. I met her actually at Christian Fellowship. So I was sort of hanging out doing the normal law school social thing. I remember halfway through my second year, I knew I needed to spend time if I was going to meet a girl, if I was going to build some high quality relationships. I need to spend some time around people who really share my values. I became sort of very convinced that this is worth investing in. One of the first times I went to Christian Fellowship, I met her, and a few years later we got engaged, and then another year later married. So it was a real blessing to be around Christian people where that values alignment was created those opportunities. I also met a classmate, who became a business partner, Peter Rex, probably the most nonconformist guy at HLS. Basically never went to class after his second week there. Also probably maybe the richest self-made guy coming out of it now. So he knew how to use law school for what he needed to get out of law school to advance his mission. And that really shaped me. He played a key role. We graduated in 2010. We ended up partnering in business to buy distressed real estate in Florida and Texas, places that had been very hard hit by the crisis, but offered some compelling demographic opportunities. And he had some experience in real estate. I had an offer at Cravath. I deferred that, never ended up going back to law firm. And spent the next 4 years of my life down there doing what was, in a sense, a dissident perspective of investing, but it was one that I felt extremely high conviction on. It was sort of obvious that if we played these things out correctly, there was a very clear path of where this would go in terms of success, and it was very content to go just a different path than all my peers career-wise, and sort of a different type of firm as well. And Pete played a key role in this, and so I know sort of the role of men in one's life is a theme here. He really had this remarkable independence of thought. He'd actually planned to be a priest. He's Catholic, grew up in same area I did, had planned to become a priest, realized sort of business was a better fit for his vocation. He also was a nonconformist who got kicked out of every school he ever attended, or almost kicked out. But he approached business with the same level of sort of philosophical intensity and thought and mission as would have approached the priesthood. And it was sort of interesting, someone who's able to really show this very firm line between philosophy and theology and the first principles to mission and having a very clear mission, but also being able to just apply that to decisions and to an analysis of reality in a way that helps understand that those ideas can have very clear implications for what is the right decision today, not just based on I want to go to a different place, a different mission, but even what if we understand reality differently than other people might be conventionally looking at reality, you can see business opportunities, you can see investment opportunities, and you can make very high conviction bets on those if you have a high conviction that you're right. And that was a very thoughtful, and then I would say just even the stewardship of time, recognizing that everything we do is something that we're stewarding for this greater mission. And there's a seriousness that comes from that that's very different than I think what can be a very consumeristic mindset of a lot of people who are going into these sort of high money careers where it's really, we're successful, we're being sort of showered with opportunity to really enjoy worldly success. And this was someone who did not care for that at all. And it was all about, here's the mission. And that shaped me profoundly in terms of how I think about life and business. And it really resonated with me. I had gotten married. I sort of fast forwarding a little bit on the personal side. Well, so we spent 4 years doing that, spent a year traveling around the world to understand a global perspective. That was, again, Pete's idea of how do we get more of a perspective on the world is, well, go visit, in my case, with my wife and 6-month-old kid at the time, 65 countries and ask people about patterns of opportunity and challenge we're seeing across first world countries to third world countries, understand the dynamics of government there, the dynamics of politics, the dynamics of what's shaping those societies, what the opportunities that result are, and just a sort of intense study there. And really one of the major takeaways, we would meet with businessmen, nonprofit, pastors, missionaries, whole sort of man on the street, the tour guide asking questions, whole range of people shaping that global perspective. And what I particularly developed and took away from that was a very clear sense of the importance of governance in so many aspects of society, the incredibly high stakes that can make in terms of many of the decisions that you make and the dynamics that you see, and in particular how technology was changing that governance. So going back to some of my earlier points about the sort of nature of a system changing, I think technology is effectively creating a sort of digital layer of government. You can see this sort of pretty obviously with Elon Musk's takeover of Twitter. That was not just a private equity acquisition for the money. That was more like a feudal lord taking over a domain that has strategic importance from a governance perspective. In fact, you could look at those tech monopolies as de facto a layer of government from a constitutional perspective in terms of the policies they set. And that was clear from traveling around the world, where you could see how something like Uber was able to project governance and reliability into, say, a country like South Africa, where you couldn't trust the local taxi cabs, but you could trust that through Uber or the Visa or MasterCard ability to add sort of a trusted layer digitally in countries where there was low trust infrastructure. Kind of to wrap up some of my personal moves and get into the Christian venture paradigm, which is really the implications of this. I moved to San Francisco for a few years after this trip, basically jumping into the deep end in technology. And that really started the real exploration, the search for these themes, for given this sort of importance of governance and politics and the intersection with technology, what is that going to look like? What should we as Christians be doing about that? Moved to Dallas in 2018, just had my 5th kid. Wife homeschools now. We attend a Presbyterian church there. Really a great place to raise a family and a great place to be doing what I'm doing. Getting into the venture, and I'm going to give some preliminary thoughts about kind of the answer to my question, a Christian venture paradigm. It's something that so much remains sort of a directional thesis and then specific implementations. Venture fundamentally is about building the future. So as someone who is inclined to dissident ideas, I found the space attractive. It's a place where a particular focus on what might change. You're making concentrated bets on things where there's going to be a major difference. Thiel has this famous question, Peter Thiel, where he says, what is one important idea you believe that most people do not believe? And it touches on this. I saw that tech was changing the world, as I said. Things like these digital layers are shaping governance, and it's fundamentally political, not just in the headline partisan question, but fundamentally the sort of Aristotelian sense of politics, which are these fundamental questions about how you live together. What are the goals? What is a good life? How should a society be organized? Very, very political. You realize that so much of the digital questions of business are inherently political when you recognize that definition, that broad definition of politics. And politics is growing in importance, growing in the stakes of politics are growing rapidly, and they grew drastically since 2016. It was certainly no longer a place where dissident ideas were irrelevant. Now they're reshaping things. And this was a departure from the norm. In the 90s, sort of the stakes were at an all-time low, like an argument over a sex scandal was sort of the biggest thing. Now we have fundamentally different visions of how we live together, what our future should look like, what it even means to be human, that are promising potentially radically different directions that we should go. And I would say tech matters deeply for that. It is, as I talked about, these platforms like the policy on Twitter, the policy on Google, can be as important as laws passed by Congress in many cases for what that society is going to look like. And I think it could radically reshape even the existence and sort of structure of our society. And we don't have to like those trends. I think there's a lot of recognition. You look at the Arab Spring, sort of initially thought bringing democracy, very quickly supplanted by ISIS coming in and such. It disrupts existing regimes. It could reshape the structure of government. We don't have to like that, but as Christians, we should recognize it's true, and we should recognize that it matters. And I think we, more than people who are sort of deeply invested in the current system, if you're just a, let's call it, secular conservative who cares deeply about preserving the good things that exist, that brings a lot of anxiety. As Christians, we have something that's much deeper and more timeless than that. We do not have to be afraid of even radical change to the order. We know that the church will survive, and we know that our faith and our beliefs have implications for whatever structure society takes, whatever happens. We have important answers to questions. So, but at the same time, Christians are not active here. So I saw most tech and venture diverged sharply where these questions are being debated, where the things that are going to shape the future are, sharply from both the value of many Americans, or sort of a very, very different viewpoint dominating a lot of these institutions, and also from a Christian vision of what we should aim for. So that was really the compelling need I saw. What should Christians do about this? What does a Christian vision of venture look like? And I'm just going to give sort of to sort of wrap it up, I'm going to give some high-level overviews here and some examples of how we're approaching this. But it's really a sort of fundamental problem that I think everyone can think about. I think too often Christian in business simply means, maybe I shouldn't say too often, it means a few sort of values layered on top, or prayer or something layered on top of organizations that are otherwise largely indistinguishable from secular peers. This isn't always bad. I mean, in a lot of areas, our Christian culture has shaped norms, common grace has shaped norms that the norm is pretty good. It's fine. That's the way we should be approaching it. But I think when it comes to these key areas in venture and technology, things like the implications of AI, those are, in a sense, you could say, concentrated with their values-laden, concentrated spaces. And I think a Christian approach in those high-stakes questions is going to look radically different than a secular one, certainly than some of the dominant transhuman secular ones that we're seeing, where they sort of very consciously have a very different direction than Christianity. And venture in those spaces is an area where as Christians, we should have a very significantly different view of the future that we're looking for. And there's the opportunity to mobilize people around significantly different alternatives. Many people are pessimistic right now as they look at these changes. They see disturbing cultural changes, no clear path to change these. Widely collapsing trust in society, and societal trust collapse in institutions and in societal trust generally. As I mentioned, non-Christians dominate nearly all the institutions in tech that are shaping this. They dominate nearly all the legacy institutions in our society. I think for a lot of people, they look at this and they are not thrilled about the future. They are not happy about the direction we're going, or they feel it's like we're all doing pretty well, probably most people in this space, economically at least, but feel a sense of sort of resignation about the ability to change the direction of society, even if we'll be fine. I'm a lot more optimistic. I think Christians have some unique advantages. Not only do we have a sort of faith that we'll be fine in the ultimate sense, but I think we have some unique advantages that we can harness to build networks and institutions that are resilient against broader turmoil. Done right, I think these can protect us, and they can serve as beacons and draw many others across our society as other institutions decline. I'll just give 3 quick examples. So, trust is declining. And in a space where trust is declining, high trust communities, such as those that disproportionately exist in churches and in Christian communities like this one here, will have something that's increasingly scarce and valuable. In many other eras, this sort of network played a key role in economic opportunity and mediating many things in society. You could build and invest in a church community, relationships that could get your kid a job and things. Instead of having to really, in recent years, that's been sort of crowded out by being shifted to, and I'm wrapping this up pretty quickly, we're getting to the end of the 30 minutes. Instead of, that's been crowded out, and now we have to sort of put all of that effort into institutional alternatives, like pursuing a degree at Harvard or pursuing a degree wherever. As institutional trust declines, people may lose faith in those alternative opportunities, and they'll be hungry for something that can be trusted networks that can mediate that sort of opportunity. We have networks like that. In past eras, as an example, the Quakers in the 17th and 18th century England were sort of a notably high trust community. And in a society that was lower trust, they not only had the ability to do business with each other in ways that allowed them to really thrive, but they became desired counterparties for the rest of their society. And you see Barclays Bank come out of that. Barclays was a Quaker institution. And if you think about it, if you have a network where you can really do business in a high trust way, you as a group now have the ability to become a hub, a broker, a mediary for all sorts of high trust transactions. Like that is a chance where we can not just leverage something that we have that is going to become scarcer in society. We can do so for our own good. We can do so in a way that can actually allow us to be a pillar that stands up even if there's broader sort of social decline in key ways. And in many ways, you now have a society that's reoriented around a Christian institution that has a lot of that cultural shaping and norm shaping power. So that's one example of how we can look at an advantage and look at how do we build businesses that harness that and are self-consciously aware of potential tumultuous disruption in terms of collapse in trust, and we can provide something that will have an asymmetric upside expectation and a influence on society. Another one is AI. AI is rapidly advancing. Digital networks and algorithms are propagating, reshaping every aspect of life. Fundamentally, we have a different understanding of humanity. We don't just have a different vision of what we want to get to. We understand people differently. And if we understand people differently, we're going to know how to make products that are actually, that reflect a truly Christian understanding of the person. And those are not just going to result in a more virtuous or better society. They're also, in many ways, going to be more likely to work. The other people who have a transhuman view are too often going to make bets that reflect a sort of arrogance about the replacement of people that is not going to play out. And if we understand people correctly, we could have a correct venture bet on the type of technology that complements and leverages humans that's going to succeed versus someone who believes they're going to be replaced. What am I doing about this? Just really, really quickly, building the venture fund, as I mentioned, just a couple of examples. We invested in a pro-life health insurance startup. A pretty straightforward business, become very values-laden in recent years. People are really aware of health as an area that has all sorts of, whether you'll have doctors who will respect your vaccine choices, whether you have doctors who will try to trans your kids, as well as like, will your insurance policy be paying for abortions? That matters to a lot of people. This is founded by a couple of Catholics. They're building an innovative health insurance policy that's also just going to cost only slightly more than these Catholic health sharing or these Christian health sharing ones. It's going to be a cutting-edge policy. They're just great people who understand this space, and they understand a hole in the market that is left there by the sort of pervasive values of most of the large institutions. We're building this hybrid town. Venture obviously means the digital domain, but the local is always going to matter. In some sense, I would say I don't know what's going to happen to many layers of life, many layers of government, but I can tell you the digital will matter. In 50 years, 20 years, it will matter. It's only growing in importance. And the local will always matter. Who your neighbor is, it doesn't matter how much digital disruption you see. Who your neighbor is always going to matter. So the innovation in local institutions is a huge one. And we're essentially approaching, in that case, real estate with this venture mindset of can we build communities that embody a vision and a way of life that allows people to thrive in particular environments. If you're especially relevant, I think people with more modest incomes where the ability to raise a family of four kids, let's say, well, at a modest amount where you can't afford private school necessarily, or you can't afford sort of lots of the ability to insulate from broader societal trends, requires a community where those norms are truly normalized, and a set of institutions that reflect that. And so there's an opportunity to sort of innovate in what that could look like, that could serve as a model in a society where sort of many of the norms for institutions has moved away from a Christian vision. Fundamentally, my project is to amplify key aspects of this positive alternative vision and to bring together the people who can help flesh it out and build it. And then, and so it's building the network. It's preaching this optimistic vision despite disruption, bringing together people, and then in select cases, we're actually financially backing or organizing the ventures that help realize this vision. And through all this, I'm continually searching for the answer to how Christians can double down on our distinctives. Where can we make a concentrated bet on something that we have or something that we believe differently, where those contrarian but true positions have profoundly important implications in the world? And how can we do so in ways that allow us to offer something meaningfully different and attractive, and find the advantages practically that give us the ability to actually achieve this? So that is fundamentally what I think Christian venture can look like. Happy to take questions here.
Thanks for coming up from Texas, Nate. This is great. Second time hearing you. And directionally, I wouldn't be able to articulate things the way you do, but this is just, it's very, very thoughtful and provocative. So the way I look at life oftentimes is based on my military structure. And the decision making is, what's the most likely scenario? What's the most dangerous scenario? So specific to AI, but if you want to take the question another direction, that's fine. If we're looking at this 10 years from now, what's the best case for our country with AI? What's the most dangerous case for our country with AI?
That's a great way to look at it. And I think what you get to, and even to Paul's point about politics, there's a lot of value-laden questions here, but fundamentally, I think what we should all be concerned about is the range of possibilities of reality. That's really where I would say I have sort of the radical ideas. There's just a broader range of possibilities. Things are going to change more. And once you consider that, then it sort of opens conversation in different ways. What we should do about it becomes a prudential question in many cases. So I like how you focus on what are the possible scenarios. First of all, I don't think AI doomerism is a possibility. This goes to where I would diverge sharply from conventional views in many cases, because as a Christian, I believe humans are special the way we're made in the image of God, and I think that's special in ways that go to the core of our creative ability. AI is a predictive algorithm. A predictive algorithm does not replace that aspect of our nature that is made in God's image. The first thing God did is He created the universe out of nothing. When we create, when we build, when we work, we are doing. There's a drudgery associated that can be alleviated by technology, but fundamentally, we are channeling that creative impulse that God gave us, and AI is not going to replace that. So the people who talk about AGI is going to surpass humans in every possible aspect and rapidly sort of take over the world, I think that reflects a transhuman fantasy that's much more aligned with a sort of Tower of Babel vision that's a conceit that is going to crash. Second of all, there's sort of a cynical marketing incentive for them to, if it's that powerful, then you at your big corporation had better go buy their software or you're going to be obsolete very quickly. And thirdly, it's a pretext for regulatory capture because they get to go in there and say this is so dangerous, so we need to regulate away the ability of our competitors to catch up with us. So I don't worry about that scenario. I would say the worst scenario is one where AI is just, think of it as a millions of tiny bureaucrats. I like to say AI won't replace people, but AI will replace bureaucrats. Bureaucrats, by nature, to some extent, it's sort of a scripted, automated job that's trying to strip away human discretion. And AI can do that even better than people can do that in many cases. So AI will replace sort of the bureaucratic functions where the goal is actually to have the administration of something centrally, some central policy. And that can be very dangerous. I mean, that could allow something like a Chinese surveillance state that is far more efficient than anything we've seen to this day in the world because I mean you have millions of tiny spies, informants, whatever, informing on people, watching every aspect, micromanaging. I don't think they're actually as good or as capable as humans are. So imagine bureaucratic institutions, but just sort of relatively dumb bureaucrats time and again, and there's not actually a human you can get through to. No matter how good AI becomes, it's going to be like that. It would be a sort of tyranny of the stupid in many ways. Very frustrating system. That's the dystopian one. I think that's less likely in America because I think the American spirit is just, I mean, you saw this with like the Wall Street bets thing. People will just find a way to throw a wrench into that for the lulz, as they say online. That's the American spirit. I don't think that they could create a system like that can't be broken. I think the disruptive force of the internet is more powerful than the sort of totalitarian, censorious power of it, especially in American culture. Best case was your first question. Best case scenario for AI? Best case, I think, is AI complements people. AI replaces bureaucratic activity. Bureaucratic activity, in many ways, is sort of fundamentally drudgery. We don't like the bureaucratic aspects of our job. I think technology at its best helps us advance the creation mandate or the cultural mandate, the dominion mandate over the world, and it helps alleviate the consequences of Genesis 3. So the curse promised a lot of things: death, work is drudgery, pain in childbirth. Technology can help eliminate aspects of those and move us back toward that Edenic state in terms of the ideal. So pain in childbirth, obviously, there's lots of drugs that can eliminate that. The curse of death, a lot of healthcare can help eliminate aspects of the curse and help restore longer life. And I think AI in particular is something that could complement people, and imagine an AI assistant that basically does all the repetitive, monotonous administrative tasks you don't want to do. That makes your life much more fulfilling. You can do more faster and focus on the things that you enjoy doing. So I think that's a very positive view of AI. It's doing what technology, what tools do best, which is complementing you and helping. Imagine something you control. Fundamentally, I think the question is, do you control technology, or is technology controlling you? Uber, in many ways, is sort of these God algorithms that control, lots of people who are just filling in little gaps that technology hasn't yet been able to do until they have self-driving cars. That's one model. A lot of SaaS is like that. It sort of programs in rigid processes that force you to do certain things, really like a sort of person in the gap of the technology. Opposite of that is a hammer. A hammer does exactly what you want it to do. You swing that thing, it's like an extension of you. I would even say an Excel spreadsheet does that. An Excel spreadsheet doesn't go in. There's a difference between like Facebook, where the algorithm is kind of controlling your experience. You don't even necessarily no one feels like they're in control of Facebook. I mean, I would always have this fear, like I press on post and like, do I actually know who that's going to? I don't even know who that's going to. This is not a system that I feel like I control. Excel, there's tools and techniques, but it does exactly what you want. It is a piece of leverage for all. Some people hate it. It is a piece of technology that you can use to accomplish more of what you want faster. And so I think that's a model that I think we should see. As a general rule, it's good for technology to go in that direction and really amplify our creative output as humans.
You spent a lot of time talking about the value of independent thought. I'm curious what practices you and your wife might have at home to help encourage your children to be independent thinkers.
So we homeschool them, and that certainly, I think, is an environment that's conducive. And really, homeschool often looks like about 3 hours of formal schooling a day. So I think if nothing else, just not being in a deeply structured environment for a majority of the day, they'll run out and go fishing for 3 hours. I don't know what that does for his independent thought, sort of in a direct sense, but that was a lot of how I was raised, and I think it's an environment where boys can be boys in a particular sense, and they can kind of just be a child and develop. We saw the laugh video, right? I think children naturally, they have an appreciation for sort of difference and things in the world that I think cultivates that, and to some extent it's just don't stifle that. Don't try to turn them into sort of someone who's optimized for fitting into an industrial system. More than anything, my kids have shown enough signs of independence in some of the same fortunate and unfortunate ways I did that I don't know that I need to proactively encourage it anymore.
Hey, Nate. First of all, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it. You're moving in so many different spaces and thinking about a lot of the big societal issues. 65 countries is a lot of travel. What does it look like in terms of your day-to-day relationship with Jesus? How do you keep that fresh? How do you stay close to him?
So it's a good question. I think it's look. I think that actually is a great example of where routine and discipline is so important. So just always do a devotional. I do a little listening devotional. If nothing else, I'll make sure I do a sort of, it's an app called Dwell, and just a sort of a 10-minute comes from comes from readings from the Book of Common Prayer or some sort of similar system, and listen to that. I think the key is to remember prayer when I have significant decisions. Pray and recognize that ultimately this is in God's hands. I appreciate God's sovereignty. And so we do have with prayer at the company. We'll be very public about that. I'll make a point to pray publicly when I'm at a lunch, for instance, even with a non-Christian. And what does that do? I mean, I think it certainly sort of shows him something, but it's also a reminder, like it's the kind of thing that even if it feels awkward or whatever, look, I'm doing what I'm doing for a distinctly Christian vision, and I need to be willing to show that. I need to put some skin in the game there, and that's a good reminder to me it's a good reminder to me that that's the purpose, and that's ultimately, it's about God, not it's not about it's easy to get. I would say the great temptation in something like this is the great temptation of sort of power politics generally. You get caught, and I think sort of doing big stuff on Wall Street on the money side feels the same way. You just get caught up in something where you feel very important, and you're doing very important things, and you're dealing with things that matter for the world, and that's doing it for God is cool, but really it's easy to get caught up in sort of the same game as everyone else, I think. And so I think it's important to have sort of the regular reminders that that I'm submitting to God, that this is ultimately something that's in His hands. And then I think finally the sort of family devotions, doing stuff with my kids, doing catechism with my kids. It's my personal. Well, and I would say another one is actually not. I have a pretty strong practice of not working on Sundays, and always attending church. Even when we traveled around the world, we would pretty regularly attend church. Sometimes we didn't even understand the language. Most of the time, we could find an English language service, but sometimes we didn't understand the language. That's a blessing. It's a blessing to be in churches around the world with different people. I remember an Easter service in Taiwan, for instance, and it was in English, and it was really cool to go to a service there. Very memorable. I remember a lot of those church services. So I think just prioritizing in many ways the routines. I've grown a greater appreciation for sort of the structure of more structured churches, and I think you're seeing that actually digitally. You're seeing a lot of people lean toward Eastern Orthodoxy as a very trendy thing in the digital world, and I think there's a reason for that, and it's not. Some of it's sort of the aesthetic and all that, but I think a lot of it is Orthodoxy is a very structured religion, and as a Protestant growing up, I sort of didn't. We're taught to sort of be skeptical of that structure. Is it real? Well, in a world where you're seeing the radical change regularly that you're seeing in things like AI, you're seeing in things like digital networks that are disrupting entire spaces, maybe there's a benefit to structure. Maybe we as humans are not equipped to try to think through every decision all the time, and so something that actually has a timeless tradition and a timeless structure and imposes those disciplines on us, I think is actually a way that God can anchor you in important aspects of your life rather than, and I haven't converted to Eastern Orthodoxy, but I think the Protestant tradition has a lot of those abilities as well. I think there's a real benefit to the forced discipline of more structured approaches to religion, and yes, it can be rote. Yes, it can be sort of you're doing it whether or not you believe it. Well, that can still actually bring benefits, I think. And second of all, God can work through that. And second of all, it's better to do it in a sort of structured and rote way than not do it at all, which is too easily the option if in a rapidly changing world you just lose sight of it. So that's an area I don't do as much of that as I would like to, but I am leaning toward more of that.
You mentioned the absence of Christians from a lot of the institutions in our culture. Can you distinguish what you're doing in your venture fund and in this community out somewhere outside of Nashville from what has kind of been this? We had this trend where Christians sort of created their own little parallel Christian economy and universe with our own Christian newspapers, our own Christian TV stations, our own Christian schools, disengaged from the mainstream culture and are not present in it. How is what you're doing different from that sort of disengagement Christian parallel worldview?
So I think it's a very good question, and I think to some extent there's a balance, because if you're very, very engaged, like I would say the Tim Keller model was sort of deeply engaged in the existing institutions. Now, I would say the problem in evangelicalism was not just it was a retreatist disengagement that involved a sort of stepping out of any desire for sort of elite influence in society, of culture shaping. So it was really a very heads down retreatist. I think it's actually influenced by eschatology. When you have a dispensationalist eschatology that the world's going to get worse and end, it's that which is predominant in evangelicalism. Definitely do not need to get into an eschatological debate here, but it can certainly be conducive to saying, hey, best thing you can do is put your head down, hunker down, keep your family, preach the gospel, save souls, but don't build culture-shaping institutions. Keller, obviously, coming from a Kuyperian viewpoint, is much more adjacent to a post-millennial and a much more optimistic view of the ability to transform the world. So I think moved back toward a engagement with the world. But if you're going to engage with the world, then and try to shape culture, there's prudential questions about how. And you can do it in the way that Keller encouraged, which is very much through existing institutions. James Davison Hunter sort of encouraged that model. Or you can do that in a way that is sort of recognizing that it's sort of a more of an exit and disrupt model, where you exit from some of those things, you build something different, but it's not purely we're just going to hunker down and build our own thing, our own culture, and just try to stay away, but it's more of the Silicon Valley mindset, where you exit and you try to build an alternative with an aim toward disrupting. I think one way to look at it is the difference between, let's say, the Quakers, as I described, and the Amish. The Amish sort of exit and are very hunkered down. They're able to preserve their way of life in a much more negative, much more hostile world. I didn't talk as much about this, but Aaron Renn has written a decent amount about this. He's a co-founder of American Reformer, and he has a book coming out talking about the negative world. And his view is the world has become fundamentally negative to Orthodox Christianity in the last 10 years. It was sort of neutral in the 20 years before that. That was the era in which Keller's model thrived. Before that, it was positive, and you're sort of good to be known to identify with Christian values, Christian morality. Now it's fundamentally negative. In a negative world, the question becomes, you probably need more isolation. You look at like Orthodox Jews and how do they preserve a distinct culture and a distinct value system, a distinct society in a world where they're a minority. There's a lot of practices that separate you from the outside. The Amish do that to an extreme. No attempt to influence society at all. I would say the Quaker model, they were distinct enough. They had distinct communities that could maintain a different set of norms that allowed them to do things like build these alternative institutions. But when you're building a bank like Barclays, you're obviously not just separated from the world. Like that is they're doing something at a world-class level, and they're doing it in a way that allows them to offer their services in really a very elite circle of society, a very influential circle of society in a way that can scale. And I think that's fundamentally, it sort of is your goal, exit so you can offer something better to the world with a very clear aim toward preservation, but also disruption, or exit so we can sort of hunker down in our own little bubble while we wait for Jesus to come back.